Joe here from the editing stage. That's literally all of the cinematic crap that I filmed. So if you want more of that kind of stuff, head over to ESP or something, because from here on in, I'm just sat on a chair chatting. Well, it's actually a week later since my last trip down here where you saw me catch that 18-pound, I forgot the exact weight of it now, but that lovely linear. And that was from peg 3, which is the complete opposite end of the lake to where I am today. I'm in 9, and I have been for the last, well, I'd say 20 hours or so. I got down here yesterday morning, probably by about 10ish, I'd say, 9:30, 10. And the reason for choosing this side of the lake is because I checked the logbook when I got to the lake. Obviously, I watched the water as well, but I saw that over the weekend a lot of fish came out from this side of the lake. So from this swim all the way along to 7 and 6. So this half of the lake basically seems to do quite a lot of fish. The odd fish coming out elsewhere as well. They very much seem to be on the move at the moment, very active. They're on the munch. A lot of fish have been coming out. So I think there's a good chance in a lot of swims, but going by what had happened over the weekend, it made sense to start where a lot of fish had been coming out from. So that's what I done yesterday. I moved around to 9, and whilst I was here, I saw a couple of fish show, and I thought, happy days, I'm in the right spot. And the wind was pushing up this end quite strongly, actually. It started to die off as I was putting the rods out, but as the wind was hacking from that corner, which is peg 3 where I was in last time, up to here in 9, pushing right up into this bay, I thought it makes sense to stick some rods quite close into this corner. So the left-hand one went right over by the tree line. I went out in the boat to start with and was just prodding around trying to find anything a bit firmer. It's quite a silty bottom out here and not a lot to sort of present really nicely on if you're not careful, or at least that's my experience of the place anyway. So I was just feeling around for anything firmer, then donk, I found something that was a bit firmer. So that one is quite a small spot that I found there. But once I found that spot, I sort of gave myself a reference by looking at the tree marker, put a load of bait out while I was there, came back, got the bushwhacker and shipped it out and dropped it what I think was pretty much bang on. I'll find out when I reel it in a bit because it didn't go off, unfortunately. So that was that one set. Then the right-hand rod, same idea, but just went further down the bank again. I went along in the boat. I know there's a harder patch over there, but a lot has changed since I last fished that spot. And there's a lot more tree growth and things. So I went around, couldn't find anything glaringly obvious on my preliminary. I didn't want to be too long in the boat. I didn't want to start splashing around. I'm the only one here this trip. So as I was saying in the last one, when there's more people here, it pushes the fish around. So because it was just me here, I wanted to be as quiet as possible. I was barely using the oar. I was just letting the wind sort of help me drift in. So I was making barely any noise, plodded around, found a firmer area, and again, put some bait over that. That one was a bit too far for the bushwhacker, so when I came back, I had to clip up and cast that one over. So that was 2 rods set on where I thought the fish were going to likely want to be holding up. And then, excuse me, it's not that funny, I think I swallowed a fly. And then sod's law, our fish rolled completely down this way. So it wasn't out of my reach. I can't cast it because of this tree, but because I got the bushwhacker, I could ship one down, and one rolled just off the reed line, just past the next swim. And I luckily had exactly the right number of sections to reach down to that fish. So I shipped all the way down and let the wind sort of drift it around. So I got it fairly tight. I was probably a couple of feet off the reeds, dropped it down there, and that was me set. So 2 where I thought the fish would be, and 1 where a fish had just shown. And I think I'd been here for a couple of hours, so again, a fairly quick bite. And it was the one that went down the margin that done the bites. That's what you're about to see. And it was actually a fish I was after from a few pictures I'd seen previously of a friend that had it. I really liked the scale pattern and how it looked, and it ended up being that fish. Happy days, have a look at that one. Beautiful fish. I have a feeling this is one I saw pictures of years ago. And it's not the biggest of fish, but the size of the scales on its belly, or on its side, sorry. Really pretty fish. And if it is the one I've thought of, then I've wanted it for quite a while. But 25.2, 25.4, just over 25. Very welcome. And again, it's only taken, I don't know, 2 hours since the rod went out. I've got the night ahead of me, so hopefully this is a sign of things to come again. That last trip I was down here, I only had the 1 fish, and it just seemed to switch off my swim, but I'm the only one here today. The wind's pushing up in this corner, and this one was just the last rod I stuck out. I put 2 out to the far bank where the wind was hacking in, and something rolled right down the margin just beyond the next swim. So I bait and pulled along, dropped it down, and this is the one that's gone. Happy days. Thank you, mister. What a mega fish. On a little run at the moment. I had one last week from here, then I did another session for work where I had a couple of 20s and a couple of others. So I'm enjoying my fishing right now. Let's get some snaps of him, get it back. So really happy with that one. Obviously not one of the real big ones that are in here, but one of the ones that I like the look of from seeing a photo years ago. So really happy to have seen that. And the really funny thing, it's one of those situations, it's not really happened to me before, where you discuss a fish with someone and then you end up having it. So it's only last week when I was fishing in 3, I was messaging one of the other members. I sent him that picture of my friend that had that fish and said, really want this one. I know it's not the biggest, but it's one I'd really like to catch. Next session on, first bite, that was what it was. So funny how that sort of thing happens, probably completely coincidental, but if it's some kind of carp gods or fate, then thank you very much, because very lovely fish to add to my catalogue. Now, last week, since my last trip here and this trip, 2 of the big ones have come out as well. So they've all been on the munch, they've come out. Sometimes big ones can come out more than once, but I'm not holding my breath. So it's quite likely that they've been caught and will sulk for a little bit longer. So I'm not holding out any hope on catching them on this session at least, but I'm very happy with that. Now, I'll carry on to the rest of the session in a second, but I just thought I'd talk to you a bit about the bait application that I'm using. Last time, I sort of recapped you on the rigs that I use, but didn't touch too much on the bait approach, and I often get asked quite a lot what bait I use. And a lot of you already know it's Scope It Squid. I've used Scope It Squid for years. I just catch on it everywhere I go, and it's not freezer bait either. This is shelf life. I don't have the space at home for a bait freezer, unfortunately, and my sheds are just rammed full of kit from work, so I have no room for a shed, and also didn't really want to run a freezer on an extension lead. We only do our tumble dryer on that, which is stupid as well. So I got shelf life, but to boost them up, I've got the 15s and the 12s, and in this bucket, put that down, and in this bucket, it's just 10s, or I think it's 12s and 15s, all glugged up, and they are so sticky. You can see them stringing off each other. And these have been soaking for months. I mean, it probably was the tail end of last year I stuck some of these in here. And that is the Scope It Squid spod syrup. And I'm just shaking that around, and every time I wet in the shed, I'd shake it around to coat them again. And also a little bottle of the worm cell. So that's been soaked right into those boilies, and they're super sticky, super sweet, but they're now really soft as well. So they're easy to break down. And I'll get onto it in a second. I've had another fish and it was pulling it out all over the mat. So it's clearly digesting it, even on the shorter sessions, it's getting that sort of stuff straight through it. So it's clearly nutrients. So for those of you that don't have room for a freezer, or maybe you have and you've just got the odd kilo in there hoping that that'll be enough, you don't always have to go down freezer bait. Some venues want you to, of course, but I have had no issues with freezer baits. I'm all over the place. I often leave a bucket of bait in the van, and this glugging it just keeps it fresh as well, but also boosts it to the max. So that's why I've been using that, and it's done me to good effect so far. Then I've also just got a bag of plain boilies, because although you can crumb that up, it absolutely ruins my crusher because it's so sticky and horrible. So I've got the odd bag of plain stuff, which is easier to crumb. And then when I'm putting the rod out, I'm just putting a load into this crusher, mulching it all up so there's a lot of crumb, because when you put that into the water, it's incredible how much that disperses through the water column, spreads over an area, and that's the sort of thing that will keep them grubbing around. It'll settle really nicely on the top of the sill. So if some of those boilies are dropping down and starting to sink, at least all the crumb covers the top, and it's still something for them to smell, something for them to see, and when they're rummaging around, the boilies will be coming up as well. So that's another thing I've been adding. So it's not just whole boilies that have been glugged, it's a load of crumb as well. And then hook bait wise, you saw last week, it's exactly the same. It's one of these boilies, dead simple, and you saw the rigs last time as well. And then I'm using a 3-bait stringer, which is something I forgot to mention last time. I put it in a little caption, but just 3 baits on a bit of PVA tape wrapped around the hook link, and then you slide it down so it masks the hook for 1 point, so I know that when that drops down from the baiting spoon, even if that lead plugs in, because I'm using a fairly supple coated braid, that will lay on the top, because it's very unlikely that 3 boilies or 4 boilies is going to sink straight to the sill. So it sits on the top, that dissolves, then you've got a parcel of 3 freebies and your hook bait, all in this one little nugget of bait. So it's a bit like using a PVA bag or something, but it's a lot easier to attach them. You're not ripping a hook through a bit of mesh. And to finish off, you guessed it, a bit more Scope It Squid. This is the hook bait spray. This is also PVA friendly, so it's fine to be spraying onto the stringers. And this is just really sickly sweet, really strong. It smells sweeter than the Scope It Squid from here. This can smell a bit fishy at times, super sweet, and it's just another little thing to add to the hook baits to make it hopefully stand out more than anything else. And that all goes into the baiting spoon and then dropped wherever I think the fish are going to be. So after I had that fish yesterday, of course, I was looking around thinking, is there anything else to go by? I just stuck it straight back down. I thought if I've had one from down there, odds are they're happy being in that area. So shipped the spoon back down, dropped it. And within about half an hour, it was just fizzing up, bubbles all over the place. And I was almost sitting on the rod thinking that's going to go any second. And it just didn't. Nothing happened on that rod. And I was watching over towards the other corner of the lakes and said, still no one here. I've been here the whole time by myself for the last 24 hours. And nobody turned up, but the fish was still holding up in front of 6 and 7. A lot of fish rolling. But I was still thinking, I've had one here. I feel confident where I am. And I'm also one of those people that I'm a bit lazy. Everything was set up by this point. The rain looked like it was going to come in. So I was set up. The fish are rolling there. And I thought, well, they're not too far away. And I was still hoping that they'd move the way down this way. So show. And I ignored. Terrible angling, I know. But I was still confident. I was happy with the one fish. If I'd got one fish per session a few seasons ago, I'd have been over the moon. So I'm still happy picking up the odd fish. So I stuck it out here and left it. And throughout the night, the fish did progressively start to move back this way. I heard some fish rolling by, I'd say 5 a.m. I was awake and I got the drone ready because I saw the sunset was going to come up. So I took the drone up, and as I was watching the water, a few fish rolled in front of me. So they did move up this way. And I was getting some lovely drone shots of the mist up on the lake and just flew it about a couple 100 meters away. And sod's law, the margin rod went off again. So as the drone was hovering about 200 meters away, I was playing a fish. I managed to bring the drone back one-handed. And yeah, so considering I'd seen so many fish up there, I could have moved on to them and maybe had a fish or two, but because I was set and all quiet, I thought I'm going to stick it out and hopefully that'll work. And it did. So the right-hand rod went off, a bit smaller than the first one, but at 22 pound 2, it was another very welcome fish and the first common for a while. So that's what you're about to see. Well, this one decided to come along just as I was filming the sunrise with the drone. I shouldn't be surprised. This happened to me before, because if you're flying a drone at sunrise or sunset, often is bite time. But when it goes off, when your drone's about 200 meters away on the other side of the lake, it does make flying the drone a bit awkward, but I managed to get the drone back and film me landing this lovely one. And once again, well caught. This came off the margin rod, which I really thought was going to do another bite yesterday afternoon or evening. There was so much fizz in there, but no, they clearly moved on. There's been a lot of fish showing over the other corner of the lake. If I wasn't such a lazy angler, I probably should have moved, but I did think there was still a bite to be had here, and sure enough there was. So at 22 pound 2, a second 20 of the session, 3 fish in 2 trips. I think it's time I got to start to pack down and head on. But very welcome and lovely start to the day. So if that fish slipped back, I thought it was probably pushing it to try and get a third bite from that same spot. Considering how far apart those 2 bites were, I don't have much time left for me. I've probably got to start packing away within the next hour or so. So I did see a few fish roll just off the pads and then beyond it as well. So bushwhacker out once again, exactly the same bait approach as I've been using, and shipped it out past the pads. I was going to drop it just on the corner of the pads because one rolled there. But as I was pushing the bushwhacker out, a fish rolled probably about another 20 foot beyond that. So as I just saw one, and the bushwhacker's so silent and discreet, I've shipped it out there, dropped it, and it's been out there for about half an hour. No joy yet, but I've got about an hour or so left. And the reason I've got to pack up and head home early is because, as I told you in the last one, we're expecting a baby. And bizarrely, you have to start looking at nurseries already. So the baby's not even born yet, but I've got to go and look at a nursery this morning because the waiting lists are that long. It's probably the same all over the place, but in our area as well, where we want to go, the waiting list is that long. We got to go and view a nursery for our unborn child. So that's why I've got to wind in. But I'm extremely happy I'm not even 24 hours into a session, and to have had 2 20s on my second trip back, I cannot complain. I've had a lovely time. I actually slept better this time as well. So I am very much made up with that. I'm going to finish my coffee and my porridge, which is probably like a block of concrete now because it's been stewing over there whilst I filmed this. But cheers for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next Syndicate Diaries with some more fish under my belt. How solid is that porridge? Oh my days. That's probably going to come out with the rear end the same way I'm going to eat it.